in the building and also listening live. We are streaming it on the Palm Coast YouTube channel, and also WNZF is airing it thanks to Everlast Homes. So we appreciate that, just so that anybody who can't be here can listen to it. And obviously it'll be on the YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and play anything, if you want to look at the presentation, it should be up on the website. So, really want as many people to have access to this information as possible. I want to start the evening by just saying that this is purely informational for our residents. I am not up here trying to convince you of anything. I'm not trying to persuade you of anything. I am simply trying to provide information for everybody, because I know I did not know how our budget works until I started running, until I ran for office. Government budgeting is not an easy thing to figure out. Fund accounting is not fun. There's nothing fun about it. And it can be very confusing and difficult to really understand how our monies are used in the government budget. So I'm going to give a presentation, just kind of an overview of the budget itself, how it works, and what we're trying to do in order to run the city in a fiscally conservative manner and put your tax dollars to work in the best way possible. And then I am going to open it up for questions. When you come to the microphone, please just make sure you're speaking directly into it for the questions, because again, we are streaming it. We want to make sure everybody can hear your very valuable questions, and I will do my very best to answer them here tonight. If I'm not able to answer something, please fill out a comment card and we will get information back to you. I know a lot on these things because I've been working very hard, but I don't know everything. So I'll endeavor the best I can to answer everything for you tonight. But if I'm not able to, we will get back to you. So we are going to talk about the budget and infrastructure. Many people who have been here for a long time know infrastructure is particularly challenging in our city because we have so many canals, we have so many roads. Most people don't realize that Palm Coast actually has 1,200 miles of roads, which for what we kind of consider a smaller city is a lot. So it's a lot to maintain. We have a very unique stormwater system and obviously our canal system. So there's a lot of infrastructure that we have to pay for and keep up with. So our city is very unique in that way. So the city of Palm Coast and all governments should have 4 main funds. We've got our general fund, our special revenue fund, our capital fund, and our proprietary fund. So the general fund is what I consider our main operating fund. It is basically what we run our big city functions out of. So it's everything from paying administration to paying for fire, police. We have a contract with Flagler County Sheriff's Office, and the monies that we pay for that contract come from the general fund. So it supports a lot of our admin functions. It pays for city council, things like that. It is funded by your property taxes. So when we talk about millage rate, which we're going to get to here in a little while, your property tax monies go into the general fund. This is also funded by state shared revenue funds and some fees for services, fines, and permits. So the special revenue fund is very different, and it's also important to understand that these monies are not commingled. So your general fund monies are separate from your special revenues, separate from your proprietary, and separate from your capital. And so special revenue funds are funds that are specifically earmarked for certain things, such as road improvements, when we need grants, so when we have to match grants, community development projects, and other activities. It is a restricted fund source, meaning that we can't just pull any funds from anywhere and pay for special revenue projects. This fund is specifically funded by specific taxes, grants, donations. One thing I want to point out is that the street improvement plan that we have, so the plan that we use to keep the pavement and the streets improved in the city, that is a special revenue fund. So monies that we bring in specifically for street improvement are part of this fund. So monies come into this fund and monies go out of this fund specifically for certain things such as street improvement. The next one is the capital fund. This kind of provides for large scale projects that take a longer period of time. They are our major infrastructure projects as well, and they support things like building construction, road expansion, facility upgrades like our MOC, so our center that we're building for stormwater, wastewater, that's our MOC center, and that is something that is being funded by the capital fund. And it's funded by your impact fees that are levied on the developers. So we hear a lot about, well, why don't we charge more for impact fees to pay for certain things? Well, impact fees go into the capital fund, and impact fees have to specifically pay for the impact of new development. So impact fees can't go towards roads that need to be improved right now. They have to go towards roads that are going to be built in the future to because of the impact of that future development. So it's really important to understand that we are charging impact fees, and we are going to do a rate study to see if we need to increase some of those, but those monies do go into our capital fund. And the last fund that we have is our proprietary fund. It's used to account for government activities that operate similar to private businesses. So these are things like stormwater management, utilities, solid waste management, and fee-based services. And this is funded through those fees that we get from those services. So your water and your sewer bills and your garbage collector fees. So I just wanted to put this up because this is kind of a good example of how each one of these funds go to work for you. The little blue box that you see here where it says our pavement management program is a special separate fund. That's what I was talking about earlier. So this is a special revenue fund. If monies are taken in specifically for the pavement management, they go into the special fund and they go out of the special fund. They do not see our general fund. And that's going to be really important when I describe the franchise fee here in a few minutes. So the Belterre trenchless pipe rehabilitation is funded by our stormwater management fund. So again, that's one of those special funds. The monies, again, that go into that go out of that fund specifically for this project. The waterfront park enhancement is a capital project, and the Southern Rec Center is partially funded from grants, partially funded by the Flagler County Tourism Development Council, and then the rest came from the impact fees. So our developers actually pay park impact fees, and the Southern Rec Center is paid in part, or is being paid for in part by those impact fees. All right, so our millage rate. Our millage rate is basically the rate at which you're taxed on for your property. So it's both residential and non-residential. The millage rate is expressed in mills, and that is 1/10 of 1%. So there's an example up there of how you would calculate what the millage is. Currently, the millage is 4.61, but we as City Council did just vote on a rollback, which means we voted to reduce those property taxes for you as the property owners in the community, both residential and non-residential. That rollback, I believe, is 4.289. I can't remember the exact rollback rate, but it did go back quite a bit. It's the most significant rollback we've had in several years in the city. And what that means for you is that your property taxes will be lower. So this is a good thing. It also caused us to cut $2.8 million from our general fund budget. That's really important to understand because your property taxes, the ad valorem monies, go into the general fund that we talked about earlier. And because we did a rollback, so we're going to bring in less revenues from the property tax, that means that we had to reduce that general fund budget by $2.8 million. And if you come to the City Council meeting on August 8th, or if you tune into it on YouTube or listen to it online, you will hear the cuts that the city actually made to that general fund so that we could accommodate that $2.8 million cut that needed to be accommodated in order to give the rollback. So I wanted to put this up because I think it's really important to understand why City Council was considering the franchise fee, which I know a lot of people were unhappy about, and I can understand that position. I do get it. But I think it's also really important to understand that the reason that that was considered is because of this chart that you're looking at right here. So we remember the recession. I don't know if everybody I'm assuming not everybody was living in Palm Coast during the recession, but if you did live here, Palm Coast was hit really hard, really hard. We had a lot of foreclosures. There were, obviously you can see during the years of 2009 to 2014, you can see our property values dropped drastically. So in 2008, the property values were over $7 billion, and by the time 2014 rolled around, we were down to $3.6 billion. So they were almost cut in half. Now during that time, you can also see that the operating millage rate nearly doubled. And the reason for that is as property values drop, if you keep the same millage rate, right, so the same rate at which you're taxing, you're bringing in less revenues, but you still have the same amount of people that you have to pay for. So what council did at that time was they continued to raise the millage rate because the property values were dropping. What you can see between the years of 2008 and 2014 is that our millage rate almost doubled. It went from 2.21 to 4.19. Now, anybody who has suffered through inflation, which we all are all doing right now, you know that once prices like this or once rates like this go up, they never come back down to where they were, okay? So I said on the radio yesterday, I remember when I was in high school, and I'm definitely showing my age, a gallon of gas costs 98 cents. We will never see 98-cent gallon of gas again. Once inflation hits as strongly as it does in times like now, we don't see those original prices again. So the likelihood that the city of Palm Coast will ever see a millage rate down at 2.21 is extremely rare. I mean, I would love to see it, and I'm gonna work very hard to get us there, but I would be shocked if it ever got that low again. So the problem is, once these rates go up this high, it's hard to get them back down. And what I don't want, what we as council decided we didn't want, was to make it so that if we do hit another recession, we have to increase your millage rate in order to bring in the same revenues. Now, I want to say from the onset that my goal when I decided to run for city council and when I was elected was to be very fiscally responsible, to try to be very smart with taxpayer dollars, to be a steward of the monies that come into our city. And the approach that I've taken is multifaceted. So anybody who has listened to the city council meetings has heard from my mouth, push economic development like nobody's business. I've been pushing commercial, industrial, economic development very hard because that is a way to bring in revenues to the city. But that's only one approach. That's only one way to make us fiscally and economically sustainable. The other approach is to be very responsible with your monies, right? To ensure we're not wasting money, to ensure that we're using monies in the right way and creatively. And one of the ways that I've endeavored to do that is to look at how current monies are being spent and how our infrastructure is being supported. What ways are we looking at in order to make those dollars get stretched a little bit further so that we can address infrastructure needs while also being smart with taxpayer dollars? And I'm going to touch on that as far as our pavement goes in just a few minutes. But the other way is to diversify our revenues. Diversifying our revenues means we're not so reliant on just ad valorem taxes, but that we can institute something like a franchise fee so that when we hit a recession, like we did between the years of 2008, 2009, and 2014, we don't see the millage rate rise and rise and rise and rise, just so that we can keep up with the revenues we need to bring in to run the city. I know that we have surrounding municipalities that have millage rates in the 6 and 8 range. And I will not abide by that. I will do everything in my power to keep our millage rate low. I do not think that we should be, just theoretically, that we should be charged taxes merely because we have a roof over our head. I would much rather charge on usage of certain services than on having a roof over your head. So this multifaceted approach to be responsible with our budget includes diversifying those revenues, which is one of the reasons we as council considered the institution of a franchise fee. So this is just a slide on what doing a rollback actually accomplishes for both our homestead and our non-homestead residents. Homesteaders obviously receive a lot of exemptions before they're actually taxed on how their property is appraised and what their property is worth. I do remember last year when I was running, I was at the city council meeting, I remember very clearly when they set the millage rate. And they did not raise the millage rate last year, they set it at 4.61, which is the same rate that it was the year before. But because our property values increased, the amount that people actually were taxed also increased. So even though the millage rate stayed the same, people were still paying more in taxes because the property values were rising. And people were very upset. And specifically, the people that don't receive the homestead exemption were very upset. We had a lot of new people that moved from up north and out west. And because they didn't get a lot of the exemptions that we as homesteaded Floridians enjoy, their property taxes went through the roof, even without raising the millage rate. So the benefit of doing a rollback like we did, so council not this past meeting, but the meeting before that, myself, Mayor Alphen, and Councilman Kloufis did vote on the rollback so that you can see some actual savings in the property taxes that both our homestead and our non-homestead residents pay. Okay, so the beloved franchise fee. What is a franchise fee? A franchise fee is nothing more than a fee that we as the municipality charge the actual power company to use our right-of-ways. So you can see on the screen here, you've got these power poles, right? These power poles are not on property owned by FPL. They're on the city's property. So basically what we do is we say, hey FPL, we're going to let you put your power poles on our property, but we're going to charge you a fee to use that right of way. Now what happens is FPL then passes that fee down to the consumer, okay? So this is a user fee because the amount charged is actually based on the amount of power that you use as a consumer. These monies they're unrestricted funds, okay? So council can decide how to use these monies. It's really important to understand that the Florida Supreme Court has actually stated that a franchise fee is not a tax. So it is not regulated by the Florida Constitution in the same way that other types of taxes are regulated. So we as council, the motion that was made and that was passed, but that is going to be withdrawn, which I'll get to in a minute, and I want people to understand it. The motion that was made was that we as council wanted to institute a franchise fee, but we wanted to put the actual rate of the franchise fee on the ballot so that you as the residents could decide how much the franchise fee could be. It can go up to 6%, that's the max, and it can be as little as 0.5%. So what we did was, when I made this motion, I said I want to make a motion that we institute the franchise fee and that we put the rate as a non-binding referendum. Simultaneously with that, I want City Council to adopt a resolution that we will adopt whatever the people vote as the rate. And as a part of that resolution, I want to make sure that we as council determine that those monies go to current roads and current Palm Coast. I don't want them going to the westward expansion. I don't want them going to Palm Coast 2.0. I want them going to our current infrastructure and current Palm Coast. That was the motion that was made. That was the motion that passed. Now, we have since learned that FPL will not agree to allow us to set the rate via a referendum. So it's really important to understand that a franchise fee agreement is just that. It's an agreement between the city and FPL. We both have to agree on the terms. And while having it as a non-binding referendum is perfectly legal, FPL said, we don't want essentially to be highlighted every 4 years in the general election in a negative way, and a big to-do to be made as to what the rate is going to be. So, as stated during the budget workshop this past Tuesday, I will be withdrawing my motion and the franchise fee will not pass because we cannot make it a non-binding referendum because FPL will not agree to it. So this is just an example of what the franchise fee could have potentially done for us. So your average power bill in Palm Coast runs about 2,000 kilowatts, not right now because it's blistering hot outside. But on average, and these are figures provided by FPL, at a 0.5%, that's 0.5% franchise fee, our homeowners would look at about $1.29 a month added to their power bill. That would generate almost $500,000 for the city of Palm Coast to go directly into our pavement management program, our streets improvement fund. So this is something that we as council wanted to look at because what a lot of people don't really recognize is that our streets, the improvement and the pavement of our streets are incredibly underfunded. Right now, this is a really good time to go into this. So maybe 3-4 months ago, Carl Cody, our Director of Stormwater and Engineering, presented council with a plan to pave our streets. And the plan that he came to us with told us that it was going to cost $12.5 million every year over the next 5 years. And in that amount of time, we would get about 75 miles of roads paved. That was unacceptable to me. It's a lot of money for a little bit of work. So I asked staff, well, what are we doing as far as trying to stretch out those dollars that we don't really have much of? And I'll explain to you in a minute where we have those dollars from now. How can we stretch them a little bit further? So the plan that Mr. Cody brought to us initially was a plan to mill and resurface, so basically provide new roads. What I asked him to do was to look at what's called global solutions. Global solutions are alternatives to providing brand new roads, essentially. They're overlays. So using different types of techniques to renew the pavement, to rejuvenate the pavement, to seal cracks and potholes and things like that, and then put an extra layer on the pavement to keep water from getting underneath the base and really breaking down and making that base deteriorate. So our staff did that. They went and they talked to a lot of other municipalities and a lot of other counties. And by the way, these techniques are used across the country and in a lot of counties and states in the state of Florida. And he came back to us and he said, guess what? This is what we can do now. We can do $6.6 million a year for the next 5 years, and we can get 400 miles of roads done. That's a third of our roads here in Palm Coast. So that was an incredible improvement. Here's the problem. Right now, our roads are funded by our local option fuel tax, okay, and we get about $2.2 million a year from that. And we get another roughly $1 million from what is called municipality revenue sharing. So basically, by law, the city has to put a certain percentage of revenues into pavement every year. And that's just to make sure that our cities are keeping up with infrastructure appropriately. So what does that mean? That means we've got about $3.3 million to go into our pavement plan, and we're still short about $3.3 million. So we asked Carl Cody, please go back and try to rework these numbers again so that we can still get a lot of our roads paved. And currently, I am working very hard with staff to move what I think is a good chunk of money, about $1.25 million from a capital project that's going on into our payment management program, so that for fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25, we can put a large amount of money into that pavement management program. So I'm still working with staff to get us there, but the long and the short of it is we have roads that are deteriorating at a pretty quick rate right now, and we just simply don't have the monies to pay for them at this moment. So still working really hard with staff to get this done, but it is a challenge. And unfortunately, we used to get the roads funded from a different type of sales tax. I believe that stopped around 2012. So for 10 years now, our streets have just been underfunded. So we're working really hard to get there, but again, this was supposed to be, in the institution of the franchise fee, was not so that we could borrow from Peter to pay Paul, as has been mentioned by certain people. Really, it was, listen, we're gonna give you a rollback. That's Paul, okay, we'll call Paul the rollback. That's the general fund, and we're going to give less money to Paul because we're gonna be bringing in less money. We're gonna make those budget cuts. We're gonna lower your property taxes. Paul's over there on an island by himself. Peter is our streets improvement, pavement management fund, okay? We wanted to institute the franchise fee. That was the goal, to pay Peter more money for our roads. So I know that, it's people very much feel like, well, you lowered our property taxes, but then you wanted to institute a franchise fee. So it's less money into the general fund, but then we're just putting money back into the general fund. And that's absolutely not what we were doing. We were lowering the property taxes and then trying to put more money into a street improvement fund so that we could get our roads paved. So the city of Flagler Beach actually has a 6% franchise fee. Most people don't realize that, and most people don't even recognize it on their bill who live in the city of Flagler Beach, because it's been on there for quite a long time. But it generates over $300,000. Obviously, they're much smaller than us, but lots of cities and counties have these types of fees. So this is another really important point, and this is something that is incredibly important to me. 92% of ad valorem monies come from residential property owners. So that means 92% of all ad valorem revenues come from you as homeowners. And only 8% come from non-residential property owners. Now, with the franchise fee, 77% of those revenues would come from our residents, whereas 23, and actually this is a little bit conservative, it's actually closer to 23 to 25% of those revenues would come from non-residential property owners, tenants, everything. A lot of different types of commercial businesses that otherwise don't pay ad valorem, and we'll get to that in a second. Well, it's actually over here on the side. So you've got a list there of just some examples: churches, schools, hospitals. None of them right now pay ad valorem, but they would pay a franchise fee. So in my mind, I'm thinking, how do I take the burden off of our residents, off of our retirees? How can I help them and still get money to pave my roads? And the franchise fee was a mechanism to get that done. So, when you think about who do I want to pay more taxes? Do I want our retirees to pay more taxes, or do I want Target, Wawa, Walmart? And I choose Target, Wawa, and Walmart. So this was just a way to not only diversify the revenues, but also make it so that less monies and less burden is on our residents and more is on some of our commercial property owners and more of our businesses. So as a part of this also multifaceted approach to try to make our city much more economically sustainable, we are working very hard on economic development. This is a very strong way to get more revenues into our city. So we are endeavoring, I hear this all the time, you guys need to bring in more businesses, you need to bring in more industry, and guess what? I agree with you, and I have done everything in my power to try to make that happen. And I can tell you I'm working very hard with city staff. They know it's a priority of mine. They know I'm like a dog with a bone on this, and they've been working really hard with me on this endeavor. So on the last slide here, I just wanted to put up, some of the other ways that we can really keep money in the city, not only from the standpoint of helping out our businesses, but also generating revenues for our city, keeping it in our city. And be local, buy local is just one of those ways. So I wanted to end with that. I am willing to answer all of your questions. I know this was a lot of information really quickly, but I just want people to understand, what we're really trying to do. We are trying to cut the budget. We are trying to be fiscally responsible, but I want to make sure that we're sustainable for the future, long term, and I want to give you, as the residents and as our constituents, power to have, just determine what you're going to pay. I would much rather charge a resident based on their usage of a commodity than I would for having a roof over their head. I would much rather see more revenues come from large businesses than my Aunt Kathy, who's worked her butt off for 45 years and is retired now and wants to travel and doesn't want to pay more property taxes for a roof over her head. By the way, a property that's you guys ask questions and also kind of educate you, because like I said, when I started running, I didn't know anything about this stuff. I had to teach myself all of this. So I just want to make sure there's really an understanding in the community and make myself accessible to you to teach as much as I can about this process. So with that, if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to step to the mic. Yes, come on up. And if you could just state your name before you ask your question, that'd be great.
Hi, I'm Ken McDowell. I live over in the C section. And first thing I want to say is, it's not a question, but well, I guess it is. Is it easier to spend someone else's money or your own money?
So if you can give the punchline to that question, then I can answer everything at one time. That'd
be great. This was a great presentation. It really was, well put together. But you're talking about increasing everybody's ability, the city's ability, to spend other people's money. We don't have any say-so in it. I love the fact that you're wanting to put it on a ballot. But did you know this city has never, since it was formed, has never had a forensic audit done? Never. Now, there are certain cultures that have been created in this city government. Rule the roost.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to wrap it up just because I want to get to a lot of people, but right. Go ahead.
So, what I'm doing, and I'm making an appeal, not just a question, I'm asking any and all city government employees that are familiar with, have knowledge of anything ugly inside of our city government to become a whistleblower. We're seeing it working in our federal government. It could work in our city government. But we need to know as taxpayers what's going on in our city. So, all you have to do, if you want to be a whistleblower, is contact me on Facebook Messenger, or you can contact our state's attorney's office in Volusia County.
So I'll address that. Okay. So with regards to, if you could, because I know we talk a lot, Mr. McDowell, and I will reach out to you again, and I appreciate you asking the question, but let me go ahead, and you had a lot in there. So I'm going to answer those, and if you have more, by all means, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to further discuss these things with you.
I'm saying this to the whole city.
Okay, yeah, yep.
Yep. And a forensic audit.
We do get audited. It's not a forensic audit, to your point, but we do get audited every year. All of our financial worksheets are online. So anybody can look at the financial worksheets. Anybody can pull those up, download them, take a look at them. If you have specific questions about things, it's incumbent on us to be transparent. Now, I cannot speak for everybody that's ever been in government from the beginning of time. Anybody who knows, who's dealt with me, I'm here making myself available to everybody to answer any questions you have. I will endeavor to be transparent with you and answer your questions. I can tell you I have pored over our budget worksheets for hours to try to find savings, to try to see if there's waste, to try to cut as much as I can. I've been in this seat for 8 months, okay? So I'm going to ask for a little bit of grace because I am trying very hard, but this is my first time really digging into this and doing this on your behalf. And in the first year that I've done this, I have been a part of a rollback. So I'm going to keep working on this. I'm going to keep working for you. And I promise you, Ken, and anybody else who wants to know, where did these monies go? Somebody asked me a question before this presentation started. Hey, I want to know where XYZ projects monies have gone. And I will find that out and I will let him know. So again, you know, if I see a red flag, I talk to staff every single week about things that I have questions about things I don't agree with, and I will continue to do that. I cannot speak for everybody, but I can say that the people that I have dealt with, I find to have integrity, and they're not perfect, and they may have different theories of how to raise monies and spend monies, and we are working on making that more fiscally responsible. But I will endeavor to be very transparent and answer questions that you have about our budget. Perry?
Hi, Perry Matrano, resident in the L section of Dan Palm Coast. Great presentation. Thank you for spelling it out a little bit better than I think we've kind of heard and all the other rumors that are out there spread by others. What I do want to mention, though, is that the franchise fee that is not able to go on the ballot, you have other franchise fees that are actually being charged, like the solid waste fee. So just so you know, that's not regulated, so therefore, I don't even know why they even have that as an enterprise fund. That probably pulls in over $1 million a year in franchise fees. There's also lots of people hauling waste up here in Palm Coast that are not paying franchise fees. They're just up here and encroaching on the people that are actually paying franchise fees. So I think that the city should take that special fund and cancel it and move that into your general fund. That'll bring you in $1.something million a year minimum. Also, on your resurfacing that you're doing, that's a great idea. I will say that you have to have a plan. I don't know, I know you got engineers and all these guys have these great ideas on how to do things. But at the end of the day, if they're doing global solutions type surfacing, then that has to have a plan for the future so that you're not in this boat. Same if you're doing a mill and pave, the same thing if you're doing general work. The other aspects of the whole business is your maintenance funds and so on and so forth. After looking and reviewing those, I think that there's some room in places that you could find in some of the projects, like leasing versus owning. Just some ideas.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So if I'm going to try to remember everything that you brought up. So with regards to solid waste franchise fee, yes, you're right. Bunnell actually has solid waste franchise fee as well. I mean, a lot of cities do. And I will tell you, I don't know when that contract is up, but it's something I will be looking very closely at. And this, the FPL franchise fee has brought, you know, just the franchise fee concept to light for me. So I know that if I'm sitting in the seat that I'm in right now, when the solid waste franchise fee does come up again, it is something that I will look very closely at because, again, these are things that I learned, you know, 10, 14, 16 months ago when I decided to run. With regards to the milling and paving and the global solutions and the long-term plan, you're absolutely correct. Our goal is to get to what we're something called rejuvenation. So what we really want is to get our roads taken care of with either milling and resurfacing or these global solutions, and then get to a point where every few years we engage in a process called rejuvenation, which is incredibly cost effective and it keeps our roads fresh and new. It's almost like slapping on another layer where we don't have to go in and fill a bunch of cracks and fill a bunch of potholes, but we can keep, again, the water from seeping in, and it's quick. It's cost effective, and to your point, it is something where every few years we can say we're going to engage in rejuvenation over a certain amount of mileage to keep the roads fresh. Finally, I think this was your last point, with some of the funds, the monies that are used for certain funds. I'm trying to wrap my head around all of the different funds and make sure that we are utilizing monies that come in the best way possible, and that we are, if we can get creative with regards to, dedicating certain monies to other projects that specifically go into infrastructure. That is what I am trying to do right now. And I can appreciate trying to find monies for that. And that's my number one goal right now, is to find monies to put directly back into our current infrastructure. Bruce?
Bruce, this city budget has been in trouble for years, and nothing's ever been done. You got people on your staff that are getting 6 figures. 6 figures for what? What are they doing for the city?
Well, is that your question, Bruce?
No, I'm going to finish.
Okay.
The city has made multiple promises to fix things. Nothing. Cimarron's is still a mess. We're getting potholes to sign the corners. Go through the Shell station on Old Kings Road. And Athens' dream of becoming a big city is never going to happen. You don't have the land space. You can't bring enough companies in. It's a disaster. Total disaster. And as we said at the last city council meeting, you're hurting the one-income people. They can't afford it. Trust me, I'm getting out of this city as quickly as possible. I worked on Wall Street for 21 years, millions of dollars every week, never audited by taxes, never questioned by the Social Security Exchange Commission, ran an honest business, and we moved tons of money, much more than you, much more.
Okay, I'm going to address your...
You can't run a budget. So when do you look at your personnel and say, what are you doing?
Okay, I can appreciate that, Bruce. I'm going to answer your question and then let somebody else come up, okay, if you don't mind. So in regards to looking closely at the budget, I can't speak to that. I've been in this seat for 8 months. I can tell you that I'm really trying to affect a positive culture change. I'm really trying to affect a positive manner of looking very closely at every single dollar, every single cent that's spent, and making sure that it's being utilized in the best way possible. I can tell you that they have, I think, come to the realization that I'm a tough cookie, and I'm going to stay that way, and I'm going to be demanding. I'm going to ask for transparency. I'm going to ask that they work hard with me to look at the budget and to really dissect it. So I can appreciate what you're saying. We are trying very hard to make that happen and to look very closely at the budget. Now, with regards to salaries, you know, we are doing currently some studies on comparing our other municipalities, other counties. I can tell you that it is tough to ask a government employee that we have, where they could go into the private sector and get paid a lot more money to stay and work for the government and do the work that we're asking them to do. Now, we are looking at it to make sure that it's comparable and that we're not overpaying people, but the same job can earn a lot more money in the private sector. So we have to be sensitive towards that and understanding. Now, I get it. There's ways to make sure that we don't have too much staff that's too high up. And one of the cuts that was made to the budget for this year was some extra positions that staff asked for. So you're absolutely correct. You have to look at who you're hiring and what you're paying, and those were some of the cuts that we made. So they are listening and they are making steps in the right direction. So if we have anybody else, I know that you have more, Bruce, but you're gonna have to reach out to me about it because I want to make sure we get on to other people.
Your hourly people?
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking like people.
I got you.
all around us.
Admin. Yep. Nope. Totally understand. I know where you're coming from. I do.
Okay.
Thank you, Bruce.
My name is Ken Klinkenberg. I built a house here in the F section in 1989. I've been in contact with you via email, and I appreciate the fact that you did get back to me, more so than other people in the city council. But my problem here is, and it is everybody's problem, when they built this community, Old Kings Road was the only road into this community. There was no overpass going on the other side or anything. And it still is not being done. You sent me the legislature, what they've done, and they approved that within the next 5 years we'll do phase 2 and 3. I have no idea what phase 2 and 3 is, and if I'll be alive to see it done. And my brother is 94 years old. He lived here in the 70s, and they promised him. At first, it was the county that was gonna do it, then it was the city when we came in, and it's still never gonna get done in our day.
So I appreciate your gratitude towards me. Thank you for saying that. So yeah, we did get monies from the state to fix Old Kings Road, and unfortunately, you're absolutely correct. It is going to be done in phases, and we got, I think it was 25 million for Old Kings, and the reason we have waited is because we knew that that was an appropriations ask that we were going to request from the state. So rather than using tax dollars and monies that we could be using to pave other roads, we had a very good feeling that we were going to be successful in the endeavor of asking for those appropriations from the state. So now that we have them, we should see some pretty quick and positive movement on Old Kings Road. I hope you do get to see it, and I have faith that our appropriations team is going to continue to ask for monies for the next phases as well. That is a top priority for the city as far as appropriations asked from Tallahassee.
Do you know what these phases are, though? What is phase 2 and what is phase 3?
You know what? I will let you know. I don't know specifically. I know that there is a plan and it's written. We have record of it, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But I will let you know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My name is Norman Roy. I live in the W section. I moved in here permanently in 2018. I was told that come to Palm Coast, it's a Republican, a conservative city, because I came from Situate, Rhode Island, which is a conservative town. What a surprise I got. They're not, you are the only person on the city council that understands economics. I know. I graduated from Brown University with a double major in marketing and economics. Basically, what it comes down to, we are in a jackpot situation. We only get 8% of our tax revenue from non-residential property. You understand that? I understand that. I was sold basically a big song and dance story about coming to Palm Coast, baby. Well, it's gonna about ready to blow up. We cannot really expand to the west unless we straighten out the city first. And it needs a good straighten out from the top down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Norman. Yeah, no, I agree with you. We do need more commercial. We need more economic development. We need to balance out. So the average non-residential to residential in the state of Florida is right around 25 to 30% non-residential to 70% to 75% non-residential. So clearly we're skewed, right? You're absolutely right. We're skewed. And unfortunately, we can't make more land. So we have to do the best we can with the land that we have in order to slow a little bit residential growth so that our commercial growth can catch up with it, and so that we can bring in good paying jobs, so that we can bring in more jobs, period, because we do have a job problem in this city. And so that is one of the things that I am hyper focused on, I promise you. And there, we do have some pretty exciting stuff coming down the pipeline. You know, we just had Advent Health open up on Palm Coast Parkway. That's going to provide a lot of really good paying jobs, and we've got a couple of really exciting things coming. So I agree with you that, you know, we've got to be focused on current Palm Coast before we can start dreaming about things going west. We got to balance it. That's what it's all about. It's all about balancing, and I am really, really hyper focused on making sure that our infrastructure and commercial development here in the current city is our #1 priority. So thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Donna Kaler. I live in the east section. I was at the council meeting where the rollback was voted on, and I want to thank you for being so prepared. I've only lived here 3 years, and so I'm still trying to figure out what the heck's going on here. And
Ma'am, can I just ask you to step a little bit closer to the mic there? There you go. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem, I'm short. Anyway, I just want to make sure I understand your presentation. You've got the fund, the different funds, and your capital fund funds capital improvement projects or capital projects. But then the maintenance of those projects down the road comes out of the general fund. Am I right?
That's a really good question that I would have to follow. It might be project specific as well, because I know that we do get grants to continue to keep up with and maintain certain things. Like Waterfront Park just is not only undergoing an expansion, but also some improvements and maintenance. So it might be project specific, to be quite frank with you. But yes, a lot of the larger projects that we do begin, yes, a lot of those things then have to be maintained from some of our general fund.
So once the impact fees are paid and all that other stuff happens, the money comes in, maintenance becomes our problem. And so to continue expanding with unfunded or underfunded maintenance doesn't seem smart to me. I would propose that we put some sort of moratorium on expansion until we catch up with fixing 1,200 miles of roads. I had no idea there were that many, but I've driven most of them, so I should have known. Anyway, it's like I said in the council meeting, maybe you remember, we have to take care of what we already have before we go out and take on more that we have not yet even funded yet. So we don't need westward expansion. Nobody said go west, young man. And how about using that land for commercial development?
Well, so, and I appreciate that. We definitely are looking at, so we've reopened our comp plan, and we have a really unique opportunity. One of the reasons I decided to run was for this very reason, what you're talking about. I wanted to make sure that as we're moving west and that as we look at the comp plan, we have more of a balance, because we can't afford to do what ITT did to us, several years ago.
We're still paying for that.
We are, yes ma'am, we absolutely are. And we're doing our best to kind of catch up. And unfortunately, that's what we're doing. We're playing catch up. And you never want to be in that situation, but that's where we are. That's where we find ourselves. And so that's why I'm working really hard to try to do the best that we can do at this point. So one of the things that I am, and I meet with people about the westward expansion probably twice a month to make sure that we have commercial, to make sure specifically what I'm focused on is conservation right now, and making sure certain areas out there are maintained in the wildlife corridor, that we can ask for appropriations from the state to keep conservation. So I hear you loud and clear, and I agree with you. We need to make sure that we are focusing on what we have, and that as we are moving west, because we will, I mean, it just is what it is, it's growth, but you got to do it the right way. And I am really, one of the things that I'm making sure that we're doing is that we're not building another 90% residential and 10% non-residential. So I am focused on that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Brad West. I live in Matanzas Woods. My questions are related to additional revenue funds, and I do agree with that we need to look at alternative revenue funds. But just to clarify too, with what you were talking about in terms of the recession and whatnot, I built in 04, so I lived through that. Okay, but what we have to protect us as property owners in that regard is that even though the city raised the millage rate, we have saved our homes. So I'm actually paying less today, 20 years later, than what I paid when I originally moved in 04. We don't have that with a franchise fee. So what that council did was they lived through that, and they actually tightened their belts and they got through it. And they did a lot during that time as well. But if we would have had a franchise fee at that time, I'm still having an electric bill. My expenses go up when everything else is going down. So that needs to be clarified a little bit with that as well. So my question has to do with, if we are truly looking at alternative revenue sources, we have an opportunity to apply for a grant for EV vehicles. That's free charging stations that we can charge users for, plus get sales tax revenue. But you voted no to do that.
Yes.
Second one to that is, we have the county now proposing to increase our sales tax. What's your position on that, and what's the city's position? Because that was voted down less than 2 years ago, and that would again be on our burden.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Brad, for the questions. So with regards to the sales tax, yes, you're right, the county is considering doing that, because that would go straight into payment of not only the county's roads, but also the city's roads. I am going to let the county make that decision. And the reason I'm going to let the county make that decision is because the city has been put in positions previously where the county has said, well, we don't really want to make the decision on whether or not we're going to fund deputies or whether or not we're going to charge certain taxes. We're going to ask the city to make that decision for us. And I will not make that decision for the county. The county needs to look at its own books and determine what it can do with certain monies and look at its own pavement and make the determination for the county. I don't sit on BOCC. I don't know what they know, just like I didn't know what I know now being on city council. So I don't want to impose my opinion as to how they should vote on that, nor will I. With regards to the EV stations, so if you recall from that meeting, Mr. West, the reason we said no is because we really didn't have enough information. So before I spend taxpayer dollars, because that's still what they are, it's still a grant, it's still a federal grant is still federal taxpayer dollars, that we're going to then match with our city taxpayer dollars. I wanted more information on what are the demands for EVs, because I've heard that the EV charging stations at City Hall are always full. That's 100% false. Half the time I'm at City Hall, and I'm there a lot, at least one of those spots is open. Most of the time, both are open. So I wanted to know what is the actual demand in our city for EV charging stations. I also wanted to know how are we going to generate revenue as a city from those EV charging stations? Because one of the issues that, one of the things that is also accomplished by the franchise fee is it's a way to earn revenues from people that are charging their EVs at home. Most people who own an EV charge using their electricity from home. Well, those same people, those same folks don't contribute to our local option fuel tax. Why? Because they're not using fuel, but they're still driving on our roads. So the franchise fee was one way to actually earn monies from people charging their EVs at home, because they don't contribute to that fuel option, the local option fuel tax. So the reason we did not go with the EV charge, we did tell Maven Rogers, who is our sustainability officer, look, don't be afraid to come with that to us again in the future, but we need more information. We were really put under the gun with that decision, and we as council were not prepared to make that decision. So that was a big determining factor in us deciding not to fund that grant. Did you have a question?
I'm gonna have like a brain fart at some point in time. So, but the gentleman here, he's correct about how we do need more commercial, more commerce and stuff, because we are severely out of balance, with stuff like that.
Sir, if I could just get you to speak more into the microphone. I'm sorry, we're streaming. I just want to make sure people can hear your question.
No, it's okay. Thank you for letting me know. But yes, he is correct. We do need more of a commercial balance here and stuff, because we are like way off. You're right. The thing is that you have to get the developers to actually support it and to do it, and the only way that you're really going to be able to do that is actually have criteria in your comp plan that's going to allow for stuff like that. So instead of just, building roads and stuff, maybe maybe look at, criteria that allows for more mixed use to be built. So like, for example, one of the terms that, if you get a chance to actually speak to some of your planners and stuff, and not the managers, but the actual planners themselves, there's an acronym that's called VMT. And VMT stands for vehicle miles traveled. And that's a number that, as you develop and grow, you want that number to get smaller. Mm-hmm. You want that number to go down, because you want people to not to have to go 5 or 10 miles just to go to the grocery store and back, mm-hmm. and stuff like that. And that's how you also can help. So I'm hoping that you guys are looking at, at things like that as you move forward, instead of just, blanket, like, okay, just build what you're gonna build and stuff, but, and I had a brain fart, so I'm sorry.
No, that's a great point, and I'm happy to address that directly. You're welcome. So great point. One of the things that I have noticed since I have become a council member is that we get a lot of builders and developers come to us and ask for variances. They asked for changes in the comp plans and the DRIs, and thank you for that. I got a 5-minute heads up. So they asked for these types of changes, and I will tell you, I have been sticking my heels in the mud to not get rid of commercial. So right now, we have a really great opportunity as a part of the Palm Coast MPD to bring in some real industrial. We have a very large potential opportunity coming for that, and we have really, really dug our heels on to make sure a very large swath of land as a part of that Palm Coast MPD stays industrial, because I 100% agree with you. We have to make sure we are not getting rid of some of the planned commercial, industrial, and mixed use and sticking more residential in there. The whole point is to have a nice balance and to have a nice mix, and I am specifically working very hard to make sure that what the original plans for certain commercial and certain industrial were remain that way. One of the arguments is that, well, because people are ordering more from Amazon, they don't really go to the grocery stores in person, they shop online more, so we don't have a need for commercial. But commercial isn't just Target. Commercial isn't just TJ Maxx. Commercial is pharmaceutical, industrial, production, manufacturing, okay? And so that's what we are working really hard to bring to Palm Coast right now. And, with that comes less strain on our resources, so less strain on police and fire, and it comes with jobs. And so I promise, I am working really hard to get more of that. We have an economic development officer who I work closely with. I meet with her and our planners almost weekly, at least bi-weekly. So I appreciate the comment, the observation, and I agree with you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Councilwoman Pontieri. My name is Daryl Boyer, candidate for the Florida State House to represent Flagler County. For those that may not know, local municipalities, i.e. Palm Coast, are able to request funding from the state through an appropriations process. As our city looks to expand and provide opportunities to all of our residents, it is important for our local officials and state officials to have a collaborative working environment. How do you plan to work with the next state representative to ensure that the needs of each constituent are best served?
So thank you for the question, really good question, and it's really pertinent right now because we are actually about to give a presentation, staff is, on what our appropriation asks from Tallahassee will be next year. So I think one of the important things is to have conversations and open up dialogue and understand what your state representatives are, what they want, what their goals are. So for instance, Representative or Speaker Renner, he really cares a lot about conservation. So when I speak to Speaker Renner, I'm going to talk to him about the hard canopy that I want to save on Palm Coast Parkway. So I think it's really important to make sure that you are having those conversations and that you're really relating with the state officials with regards to what they're focused on. Representative Waltz was here a few weeks ago. He was very gracious with his time and came to City Council, and he talked about public safety. So I know that Representative Waltz is hyper-focused on public safety. So when I spoke to him about my endeavor to make our dispatchers designated as first responders. So I think it's really important that you have to have those conversations, you have to pay attention, and you can't be timid when it comes to asking for things from the state that are going to, yes, improve our future, but that also our residents need now and that they'll feel a positive impact on now. As we look to elections as well, we need to make sure that whoever we are going to elect to those positions are worried about what we need and want in our county, and that's really important to start following now as well so that we can make the right decision at the ballot box. I think we have time for one more quick one. Yeah.
I appreciate you taking time for us today.
Sure.
My name is Harry Russo. I'm from the C section. I was very encouraged when you mentioned earlier in the meeting today that the council will be addressing impact fees. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, we are going to look at impact fees, yes.
Now that will be done before the final budget is approved or after?
I can't make that promise because that was something, I don't know the exact date. I know that it is coming up and it is a specific impact fee that we're going to be looking at. And I only know that because during the very last budget workshop this past Tuesday, I specifically brought it up and asked if we could do that. So staff has been directed to now have us reevaluate those impact fees.
A specific impact
impact fee? Or-
Yes, and I can't, I'm sorry, I can email you and let you know, I don't remember off the top of my head which one it was.
I think part of the problem that the city has is an image problem, because it seems like they're always coming to the citizens for more money, but when we talk about getting money from the developers, as though we can't do this, we can't use impact fees for this or that. What can we use impact fees for, number one? And number two, these projects, these capital funds that are funded by impact fees, do ad valorem taxes never commingle with those impact fees on these projects?
They do not. Impact fees do not go into the general fund. They are completely separate. So we only have like, it's 6:30 right now, so we're probably going to get cut off. So I'm going to answer your questions, but please email me if you have more.
So tax dollars never commingle with impact fees?
Impact fees are completely separate. And impact fees can
Never the
only,
twain shall meet with tax dollars.
they shouldn't.
Okay.
And furthermore, with regards to impact fees and what they can pay for, it is only, for lack of a better term, new stuff that is because of the impact of that further growth.
Proportional impact. I understand. I personally hope that when the council does have this workshop on the impact fees, that they bring in the legal experts on them. Because I'm not sure that the city is taking full advantage of what they can get from the developers.
So I'm going to end on this. With regards to getting creative within the legal bounds of what we can do, I promise you I'm looking into that.
Okay,
So.
I'm trusting you on that.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you. And just, I will be, just really quickly, I want to do a plug for this. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, I'm going to be on WNZF for Free for All Friday, specifically with somebody to talk about our road. So you guys tune in there. And again, thank you to WNZF for streaming this live, and thank you to Everlast Homes for sponsoring it. Thank you guys.